Yeah, welcome back, Ray. Today is October 16th, and we're going to talk about the conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Mm, Let's start with what's going on right now between Iran and Israel. How close are we to the war, to a major war between Iran and Israel? Are we approaching that moment?
Well, Nima, as you may know from our previous discussions, I've been sort of an outlier on this issue. Right after the major attack by Iran on October 1st, uh, Netanyahu and many others were saying, oh, we're going to retaliate strong. We're going to do it right away. We're going to just watch out, okay? And then they didn't do it. And then I got started thinking, well, why didn't they do it? And gradually it became clear that something's restraining them, okay? And then people say, oh, Yom Kippur, they wouldn't do it. I don't know. You know? So, sort of reverse reasoning here, which you have to do when you're an intelligence analyst. I reason that somebody put the brakes on this whole enterprise, and we're wondering who that could be. Now, would it be Antony Blinken, arch Zionist? I don't think so. Would it be uh, would it be Sullivan, Jacob Sullivan? I don't think that. Who would it be? Well, are there any examples of the military showing their strength in the United States recently? Well, yeah, unprecedented example. When Blinken wanted to authorize those longer range missiles to hit from Ukraine deeper into Russia, Blinken had it all set up with the British, and Stormer was coming, and that all went down really fast when the Pentagon announced no approval for these missiles. They announced that even before Biden welcomed Stormer in the White House the day before. So, long story short, Blinken lost out on that. He was mirabile dictu, overruled. By whom? By Biden. Was Biden happy about that? No, he wasn't happy. He was surly. He was really saddened. He told Stormer, look, you got those target lists ahead of you. Don't even open up. We're not going to authorize this. Okay, that was big. That was very big. Okay. Everybody expected not only that Biden would officially say, yeah, you have this permission to use our technology and the longer range missiles, with the steamroller or whatever they call it, they're streaming missiles, but that this had already been decided a week before. It turned out the military stood up and said, "No, this is a really dumb idea, Mr. President." So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think that not only our military, but Israel's military stood up and said, Netanyahu, with all due respect, uh, you know, we're not going to be able to do this. We got a bloody nose in Gaza. We're not doing real well in southern Lebanon. Yeah, we've gone 15 whole kilometers. That's not much. And besides, the Hezbollah and these people have these fancy drones that we can't shoot down. And the Iranians have these supersonic missiles, hypersonic missiles that you can't shoot down. And they've ruined one of our airfields. Maybe we ought to think about this. And Netanyahu, of course, will say, I got it all figured out. All we have to do is start the war, and the Americans will have to come in. Have to come in. I mean, 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks before the election, Biden will have no chance. Besides, he wants to. So Blinken and Biden will win this one out, not the military. Well, how do you explain the delay? I think the delay can be explained by our same military showing the cojones that they showed a month ago with respect to Ukraine, saying, look, this is a bad idea. Now, there have been two four-star generals visiting Israel over the last month, okay? And what were they saying? Did they want to be there when Israel fights out after Iran? I don't think so. I think they were saying, look, you guys, you got to be got to be careful here because there are limits to how we're going to support you. And we don't think it's a really good idea what you're planning to do and what Netanyahu has decided to do, announced he's going to do. So what more recent? Well, 2 days ago, or no, it was Sunday. I think it was announced that the THAAD missiles, terminal high altitude missiles, the missile defense systems, are being given by the U.S. to Israel. That'll fix them, okay? Can the THAAD missiles intercept hypersonic missiles? I don't think so. So, what was this? How many are there? Oh, there are 48. Well, how many in the U.S. inventory? Probably maybe up to 1,000. 48 could be shot off at one, and then what happens to next? They're going to run. Do they run enough of these missiles? They didn't have enough attack bombs. Okay, so there are all these questions, and so we have this announcement that these THAAD missiles are going in, and 100 U.S. soldiers to ban them or to advise them. So a lot of people say, "Oh man, that's really throwing down if the Iranians kill some U.S. servicemen, they'd be held to pay." There may be people in Washington that would like that to happen, because that could be a tripwire. But on the other hand, Iranian-sponsored people have already killed Americans in Syria, in Iraq. I don't think that's a game changer. The way I interpret the provision of these THAADs is as a sort of a consolation prize. Now, this is speculation, admittedly, but you have this long delay, and then you have the THAADs, which are not going to help very much, but are a real token. I think it may have been a pro for this quid. The quid being, look, Israeli military, you tell your boss, Netanyahu, we think this is a really bad idea. You can argue that case because you agree that it's a very bad idea. And if he lets Gallant, the defense minister, come to Washington, we're going to tell him the same thing. And more important, the Israeli military, we're going to tell the president the same thing, okay? Now, we don't know what the president's going to decide. He has to decide between us and Blinken again. But last time it went our way, okay? So nothing's sure. And if your prime minister tells you, he can certainly scoop us in, mousetrap us in, we're going to tell the president, that's not a really smart idea, Mr. President, because we can't really do it. And the Israelis surely can't really do it without our help. So don't be mousetrapped. So, as you know, last week, Gallant was not allowed to come to Washington. Yeah. His opposite numbers, the Pentagon, Austin, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So then there was a vote. But we're not real sure, last reading, how that can, a cabinet vote or war cabinet vote. So there's more delay now. And then we hear, the THAADs are going. So my guess, it's only a guess, is that the THAADs are a sort of consolation prize. We're with you 150%, right? And we're going to give you these things, which in the end analysis are not going to really help very much because, again, Iran has not only these hypersonic missiles that there is no defense against in the West, but they also have these drones, which, as you know, Gil Dubtoro described from Russian television, that can evade radar because they have the kinds of manufactured parts that don't bounce off the radar. So that's what happened below Haifa. Now Haifa is pretty far north, granted, but this was even south of Haifa, and initial reports were 4 Israeli soldiers from this crack brigade were killed. Now it's more, of course, and they're talking about up to 100 wounded. It hit while they're all having dinner or something like that. So, and the excuse is, oh my goodness, those Hezbollah folks, what they did is no fair, no fair at all. They sent the drone around from Mediterranean Sea. We were looking at Mediterranean Sea. We're looking just north, and well, that's bollocks. That's bollocks. This drone was not intercepted. If there are more drones like it, and the Israelis are really going to be in for it, the more that these things roam freely. And adding insult to injury, it's been months, in my view, in my recollection, since Hezbollah have published very detailed aerial photographic maps that show that Hezbollah knows exactly the coordinates of very, very important military installations in Israel. So, am I hopeful? Yeah, I'm more hopeful than all my friends. Does that put me out on a limb? Yeah. Have I been wrong before? Yeah, lots of times. But this time, I think there's enough evidence to suggest that somebody's putting on the brakes. I think it's the U.S. military. And if they hadn't prevailed just one short month ago, I wouldn't have any confidence at all that they would show their guts, but they did. And that's on the record. Even Netanyahu knows that. Last thing I have to say here is Netanyahu has his own personal reasons not to leave office, not to go to jail with his wife in that bridal suite they have already for him. Now, lots of people don't like those two, all right? So they're going to be convicted of these, pusillanimous crimes of robbery or extortion or whatever if he leaves office. So will Netanyahu go ahead anyway? If he orders his military to make a major strike on Iran, A, will they obey him? I guess most people would say, of course they would, but I'm not so sure this time, okay? And then B, would he be able to mousetrap Biden in during these critical 3 weeks before the election? I don't know who can say that, most people would say that, yeah, he probably, well, all people will say Netanyahu will think that he can do that. Now, whether he can do that or not, given the advice that Biden's apparently listening to for once in his life, that remains to be seen. Sorry to be so long-winded here, but it's a sort of convoluted sort of thing. And someone has to describe the long hiatus between the October 1 promise of retaliation and was it October 16th now? And that's the best I can come up with.
Ray, it seems that the foreign minister of Iran was talking about that they're not having anymore any sort of talk, indirect talks with Washington. And it seems somebody in the State Department was leaking the conversations between Iran and the United States to Israelis, to the media. I don't know. How do they really want to have any sort of diplomacy in the Middle East? Because the way that they're behaving right now, just leaking this sensitive information, and as you've mentioned, we are having a very serious situation in the Middle East. What's the end game of these people leaking this information?
Which information are you specifically referring to, Nima?
It seems that they were leaking that Iranians are talking with the United States that they can tolerate some sort of attack from Israelis, not to respond to that attack, which was leaked by somebody in the State Department
Yeah.
to the. It's unbelievable. I don't know if that's right or not, but I can say surely that somebody in the State Department was leaking this information.
Yeah, well, there is a divided leadership in Tehran. I think Gil Doctorow ran that down pretty well yesterday. And so there's all kinds of ways that covert action people will fill the pages of newspapers with stories like this. I think the more consequential leak was the leak by the U.S. government, no doubt, of Secretary Austin and Secretary Blinken's warning to the Israelis, look, you've got 30 days to be more humane and stop starving people in northern Gaza. 30 days. Oh, come on. Do the math. How many days till the election? What, 20? Oh, I mean, cynicism? I mean, they gives hypocrisy a bad name, for God's sake. So, if they thought that that would win them any votes in Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, I don't think they're going to win any Palestinian votes there. What were they thinking? Well, they're under some pressure. Even Nancy Pelosi is sort of saying nasty things about Netanyahu now. She's not inviting him to speak to Congress anymore, that's for sure. So I think the Democrats are running scared. They have been, well, in my view, Trump has been able to represent himself as the peace candidate. He's going to stop the war in Ukraine. That's big. There are signs all over my neighborhood, Trump. And I ask my neighbors, who are not dumb people, most of them, and I say, hey, why? Why are you going to vote for Trump? They say, because he's going to stop the war. Wow, okay. Now, is he going to stop the war in a day or even before he becomes president? I don't think so. That doesn't matter. That's what they believe. And so if Bush gets involved in a major war, a regional war in the Middle East, is that going to help Kamala Harris? I don't think so. But, I'm not an internal domestic political analyst. Maybe it would. But why he would want to subject himself to that when his own military is saying this is a fool's errand is another matter. So I think that even Netanyahu may be faced down this time, if not by our military telling our president to tell him, knock it off, or by his own military saying, this is beyond our capability. The Americans say they will not refuel our jet. Our Arab friends used to be friends, won't let us overfly. I mean, we can't do much harm to it. It's going to start a major war. We might lose. We can't do that. Well, will they say that to Netanyahu? Yes, I think they will. Will he be persuaded? He's got his own personal reasons and his own calculation of his hold on Biden. When I said Bush, that was a Freudian slip. I just want to remind you that after the attack on Iraq, March 2003, there were three reasons that I had used. I was speaking at universities and actually on CNN and all kind of major media things those days. Three reasons. I used the acronym OIL. O for oil, I for Israel, L for the logistic bases, the permanent military bases we wanted in Iraq. And I was saying for years that you can't distinguish that they're all sort of equal weight. Well, no, they're not all equal weight. Israel was the primary factor. We know the people, they're neocons. They wanted to do this for Israel. That's become clearer and clearer. And when I said this, when I said OIL at a congressional briefing, the Democrats in the audience, and they were all Democrats, no, you can't say Israel like that. And I said to myself, here's CNN, here's C-SPAN. Sure as hell I could say that because I don't need any money and because I'm not running for Congress or any other office. I'm an intelligence analyst. I'm going to tell it like it is. Well, guess what? The Democrats called me anti-Semitic the next day, and all over the Washington Post there was this guy McGovern who was anti-Semitic. So the retort you get for this kind of thing is very, very damaging unless you're independent, unless you're retired, unless you don't want a whole lot more money. I got enough to retire with. So that was a learning for me that people would object so strenuously for my simply mentioning Israel as a factor. I'll just say again that I think Israel was the major factor, even more than oil, even more than permanent military bases, in the attack on Iraq. And a year after the attack on Iraq, and this is what I want to say before, General Brent Scowcroft, who had been National Security Advisor to Nixon, to Ford, to to, well, to a lot of those folks, the first Bush, um, he was given this honorific position of chair of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. A big deal, okay? They get all the information, the most sensitive information, almost all of it, okay? So he was sitting there watching the war develop, watching who had the real hold on little Bush the younger. And he couldn't take it anymore after the war started, so he went to the Financial Times. Scowcroft, the master of discretion, he knew how to handle the press. He would never leak or say anything that he didn't want out there. He went to the Financial Times of London and he said, I have to tell you that Ariel Sharon, prime minister then, before Netanyahu, has little Bush wrapped around his little finger. Wrapped around, you understand me? Wrapped around it, and he's got him mesmerized. Can we quote you on that, John Scowcroft? Yes, please do. Why did he do that? Because he wanted Americans to know how much hold Ariel Sharon had on our body politic and specifically our president, President George W. Bush, and those who surrounded them. I would call them neocons. So that was the situation then. I don't see much different now, even with a president who says, I'm a Zionist, and Tony Blinken goes to Israel after the October attacks by Hamas, and he says, first thing he says, I'm not only a Zionist, I'm a Jew. I hope you remember that. And of course, Jacob Sullivan is very much a Zionist as well. So Israel's hold on us is very strong. Netanyahu knows all that. He himself has said when he wasn't aware he's being recorded, the Americans support us 80%. That's absurd. End quote. It's on YouTube. Look at it. Okay. So he'll be guided by his perceptions, not only of his success in mousetrapping Biden, but also in his dire need to avoid prosecution and jail if he leaves office.
Yesterday, we had this attack on Al-Aqsa Hospital, and here is the footage that people were burning alive in this attack. And when you look at the current phase of the conflict in the Middle East, and the way that it seems that they're just distracting us from what's going on in Gaza. They're bombing people. These people have nothing to fight against Israel. They're just murdering people in Gaza. What, in your opinion, this whole situation that they're making in Lebanon against Iran, it's because of Gaza, because what they're doing in Gaza, they want to just distract people from what's going on in Gaza.
I think that's one theory. They've been saying they would go to Lebanon for months now. It does distract a little bit, but look at those photos that we have. Look at that imagery you just showed. In this age of instant photos and the ability to get them around and about, they're not going to be able to distract too many people from what's going on in Gaza. So this business about letting people not starve anymore, my God, well, people are starving. The UN is documenting this, and the UN is trying to keep the peace in southern Lebanon. It'll be very interesting to see if Netanyahu orders his troops to shoot at UN peacekeepers. They have, at least in theory, well, in law, the ability and the permission to shoot back. Nima, I'm being called by my wife.
Okay.
Can we? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to be back.
Here it comes.
And I'm going to play Netanyahu talking about UNIFIL. And today we've learned that they're attacking UNIFIL again. Here is what UNIFIL is talking about. this in their Twitter and what Netanyahu before this attack was talking about. We know in recent days they were attacking UNIFIL multiple times, and right now here what
Deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is completely false. It's exactly the opposite. Israel repeatedly asked UNIFIL to get out of harm's way. It repeatedly asked them to temporarily leave the combat zone, which is right next to Israel's border with Lebanon. In fact, on the day that Israel began its ground operation next to our border with Lebanon, we asked them specifically, please leave this area so you're not harmed. Israel is not fighting UNIFIL. It's not fighting the people of Lebanon. It is fighting Iran's proxy Hezbollah, which uses Lebanese territory to attack Israel. Hezbollah attacked Israel last year without any provocation on October 8th, a day after the Hamas massacre. And it's continued to attack us ever since by launching over 10,000 rockets and missiles at Israel. Hezbollah uses UNIFIL facilities and positions as cover while it attacks Israeli cities and communities. These attacks have claimed the lives of many Israelis, including yesterday. Israel has every right to defend itself against Hezbollah and will continue to do so. We regret any harm done to UNIFIL personnel, and the IDF is doing its utmost to prevent such incidents. But the best way to ensure the safety of UNIFIL personnel.
Yeah. Ray, I was talking about that today Israelis were attacking UNIFIL. Here is what they said on Twitter. And they were attacked by Israelis. And before that, as you saw in that video that I played, Netanyahu is talking about they're not attacking UNIFIL. In your opinion, when it comes to these type of attacks on the part of Israelis right now in Lebanon, what do they want from UNIFIL and why they're so obsessed with them?
Well, they have not shrunk away from killing UN employees by the hundreds. They interfere with UN relief columns. It's a matter of showing raw power. They're starving people in Gaza, and there are these peacekeeping units in positions where the Israeli forces would very much like to emplace themselves and their artillery and other weaponry. The first group they came to were the Irish, and they said, "Oh, get out of the way. We have 7 tanks here. Get out of the way." And the Irish commander said, "I don't think we're going to leave here." And the president of Ireland weighed in real strong, and they left them alone. But then they shot up some Indonesians, and today, as you see, they've done some more. It's just a matter of brute strength. We don't care about the UN. We're going to take that on just as much as everybody else. And in the final analysis, the U.S. is going to support us. Now, it was interesting at the UN yesterday or the day before that the U.S. allowed itself to be part of a consensus for a statement that says you really shouldn't shoot up peacekeepers. Well, that's got to go farther than that, of course. Both Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister, there's been petitions for indictments for war crimes. I suspect those will come down pretty soon, and they will have to think twice before they get on an aircraft to go anywhere, because should it develop mechanical trouble and land in Paris or Berlin, someplace like that, they would be liable. Actually, the host country would be required under international law to detain them as war criminals.
Yesterday, the Hezbollah deputy Naim Qassem, he's talking about he said that we tell everyone to be at ease. We are the ones who will take the Zionist monster and put it back in its cage. And do you think that we have the same type of attitude that Israelis are talking that we're going to defeat Hezbollah after those attacks on Hezbollah and leaders of Hezbollah, and right now they're trying to go in the southern part of Lebanon? Do you think that Israel would be successful in its attempt to defeat Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon, with considering what we've seen so far?
No. Now, Hezbollah has shown itself amazingly resilient. I mean, let's face it, they've lost the top leadership, and all of a sudden they're still able to do things like fly sophisticated drones, kill a whole bunch of Israelis while they're having dinner there below Haifa. They're able to do lots of things. As I say, the incursion, such as it is, into southern Lebanon has been met with lots of ambushes and other deterrent things. So the Israelis have never had any luck going into southern Lebanon. And this is all part and parcel of trying to get into so much trouble, according to Netanyahu, that the U.S. will have to come in with both feet. Now, he's only got less than 3 weeks to do that. And Biden has to overcome his military's objections or admonitions about what would happen. But he still thinks that, and he is the guy. And I just don't know enough about Israeli politics to make a considered judgment as to how independent the IDF, the Israeli Defense so-called forces, are in the political sphere. Could they be powerful enough to dissuade these crazy people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu to face them down and say, no, if you order us, you say go, we won't go. We'll say no, And I don't know what the likelihood of that would happen, but I think it's probably more likely now than ever before because the Israeli Defense Forces can't afford another black eye or 2 black eyes at the hands of Hezbollah and Iran.
And just to wrap up this session, Ray, the last CNN reported that Biden is going to Germany for Germany's highest award. And the question is, what has Biden done for Germany in his presidency that he deserves this award?
Well, I have to tell you, Nima, that this is highly ironic. It reminds me of, what they call the battered wife syndrome, Here, Biden clearly gave orders to destroy the Nord Stream pipelines, which gave very cheap gas, not only to Germany, but the rest of Europe, okay? And as a result of that, not only is it really hard and expensive to heat homes, but German industry has been affected majorly. I mean, they've really gone down since they don't have access to cheap gas anymore. Not only that, but things like Volkswagen. I mean, been there in Germany forever, since before Hitler, for God's sake. They're laying off workers for the first time ever, okay? Thousands and thousands of workers. So, long story short, the German economy is going way down. Biden is the primary cause of that. The Germans know that, and yet they're being sheepishly submissive. They're giving him an award. When I talked about battered wife syndrome, well, part of that syndrome is the wives keep going back to be battered a little bit more, and they'll defend their batterer in court, and they'll give them an award. Well, that's what's happening here. And this is not the first time the Germans have acted this way, but it's the most blatant and the most consequential time. Back in 1933, when the Reichstag was burned down, there were people that said, we ought to stand up to Hitler. He's only got about 33% of the vote. No one did. They were slavishly submissive. And, that was 80 years ago, for God's sake, 80 years ago. And so what I hope now is that with this latest information, that Seymour Hersh had pretty much chapter and verse as to how this thing was arranged and how it went down. Now we have 2 additional things. One is that 2.5 weeks ago, the Habermeister, the harbor master in Denmark, across from that island near where the pipes were laid, His people detected real strange sounds in the Baltic Sea. There were ships there with their transponders turned off, and usually that means there's an SOS emergency of some kind. So they went out to see who was there. And this is a couple of days before the explosion, before these things were exploded. And so, my God, they reported back to the Habermeister. What's his name? I have his name here. It's Nielsen is the last name. He said they reported back to me, and so I reported to Copenhagen, and Copenhagen said, "Stop, stop! Don't mention this. These are American ships. Yes, we know that. You are not to say a word about this." Again, just 2 or 3 days, 3 or 4 days before the explosion. So this Habermeister, Mr. Nielsen, has kept his mouth shut for over 2 years. And, not everything is rotten in Denmark. Apparently, there was one courageous, unrotten soul, and he went to the press, and Politiken, the Danish newspaper, one of the major ones, printed it 2.5 weeks ago. Have you seen it in any media around here? No. Who picked it up? Glenn Greenwald, to his great credit, aired a little program. That's how I learned about it. I don't read Politiken, okay? Lots of people do, but they suppress this information. So I put that together with some aerial satellite photography taken at that same time, the same time that the harbor master found these U.S. naval ships with their transponders off, and there was the same story from that. And so I did a couple of tweets and a couple of website items on that, but they garnered no attention. Now we have Biden going to Germany to get an award for services performed, and the German president, his opposite number, Steinmeier is his last name. He used to be a fairly decent person, but then he got involved in Ukraine. He was there during the coup. He was the one that told nobody do anything, everything's going to be all right. And of course, we had the coup the next day. And then he was there at the Minsk Accords when they was trying to have a peaceful resolution of the crisis in Ukraine. So he's turned completely around. He's going to give Biden an award for what? For blowing up the pipeline and blowing up the German economy? There could be nothing more slavishly submissive than that. And 80 years after the war, 90 years after Hitler took power, I mean, I'm almost giving up. If I didn't have some really, really strong German friends, I would say maybe it's in their genes to be submissive. But this is this is what the Germans call merkwürdig, really remarkable that they. Will the German people ever hear about Cy Hirsch? Will anybody mention what this Danish Habermeister has just said? Well, is the German press worse than the American press? It's worse than the Israeli press. I'd say the Israeli press is freer than the U.S. press, and it's freer than the German press. It's one of those ironies, but. So this just cried out for some comment. If Biden makes it, he's supposed to go as early as the day after tomorrow. That will be really an indignity with respect to Zelensky, with whom he will not meet. But somebody said the White House said, "Oh yeah, but Biden will give him a telephone call, see how he's doing." so yeah, that's what's in store for us on Friday. Talk about. Talk about Germans and submissiveness. You've got that not only on the part of the Germans, but on part of many of the political hacks that are now ruling countries in Europe and who may not be ruling countries in Europe very much longer.
Thank you so much, Ray. Can you hear me right now?
I can now, yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're
Great today, Ray.
most welcome. Mhm.
See you soon. Bye-bye.